At the turn of the 20th century, you had two of the most brilliant minds in America locking horns over one massive question. What is the best path forward for Black Americans? This is the story of that disagreement, a clash of ideas that would literally define the fight for civil rights for 100 years. So, let's get into it. On one side, you've got Booker T. Washington, the most powerful Black leader of his time. And on the other, W.E.B. Du Bois, a fiery intellectual challenger. Now, they both wanted the same thing, the uplift of their community, but their game plans could not have been more different. And to really get why they disagreed so strongly, you have to picture the world they were living in. Okay, so this was the progressive era, right? But for African Americans, it felt more like an age of regression. Jim Crow laws were spreading across the South, lynching was a terrifying and constant threat, and then, in 1896, the Supreme Court basically made segregation the law of the land with Plessy v. Ferguson. So the question wasn't just about how to get ahead. For many, it was about how to survive. And into this incredibly tense situation steps the man of the hour, Booker T. Washington. Now, he was born into slavery, but had risen to become the head of the really influential Tuskegee Institute. He had a philosophy rooted in pragmatism, and he laid it all out in one single unforgettable speech. This right here, this is the heart of what became known as the Atlanta Compromise. Washington said this in 1895 to a crowd of Black and white listeners, and the reaction was, well, huge. It apparently got a roaring applause from the white South and won over folks in the North, too. He was, in essence, proposing a deal. So what was this deal? Basically, Washington argued that Black Americans should pump the brakes on demanding political rights. Instead, he said, focus on learning practical skills, farming, carpentry, things that make you economically valuable. The idea was if you become essential to the economy, you'll eventually earn respect and your rights will follow. For now, just accept segregation and don't rock the boat. And for a while, Washington's approach was pretty much the only one on the table. But then a new voice started to cut through the noise. It was the voice of a scholar, an activist, and an absolute intellectual powerhouse who looked at Washington's compromise and saw it as a dangerous surrender. And that voice belonged to W.E.B. Du Bois. His background was totally different from Washington's, and that's key to understanding him. He grew up in the North, was a brilliant academic, and became the very first African American to get a PhD from Harvard. Think about that. His perspective wasn't shaped by the plantation, it was forged in the university. And Du Bois wasn't one to keep his opinions to himself. In 1903, he drops this landmark book, The Souls of Black Folk. And inside, there's a chapter called Of Mr. Booker T. Washington and Others, where he publicly and powerfully dismantles the Atlanta Compromise. It was an intellectual bombshell that completely changed the conversation. Just listen to how firm he is here. Du Bois gave Washington credit for encouraging hard work, sure, but he drew a line in the sand. He argued that if you apologize for injustice or even just accept it quietly, you're betraying the entire future of your people. For Du Bois, there was absolutely no compromise when it came to basic human dignity and rights. Instead, Du Bois laid out three things that were completely non-negotiable. 1, the right to vote. He saw it as the only way to defend yourself in a democracy. 2, full civic equality, no more separate but equal. And 3, the right for young people to get the best education they could, including a liberal arts education, not just trade school. Because how can you build wealth if you don't have political power or educated leaders? So, there you have it. 2 completely different blueprints for the future. One is about accommodation and building economic power from the ground up. The other is all about agitation, demanding political power, and being led by the best and brightest. And when you lay it all out side by side like this, the difference is just crystal clear. For education, Washington said vocational skills for everyone. Du Bois said, nope, we need a liberal arts education for our future leaders. On civil rights, it was wait and earn it versus demand it now. And their main goals? Washington was all about economic stability, while Du Bois argued that any money you make is meaningless if you don't have the political power to protect it. That idea of creating leaders was so central to Du Bois' strategy. He called it the talented 10th. His theory was that the top 10% of the Black community needed to be cultivated. They needed to become the doctors, lawyers, teachers, and thinkers who could then lead and uplift the other 90%. It was a direct shot at Washington's idea that everyone should just focus on industrial work. Now, this wasn't just some debate club argument. These dueling philosophies directly led to the creation of real, powerful organizations that would put these ideas into action and carry the fight forward for decades to come. And you can see how fast this all happened. Washington's speech in 95 sets the stage. Du Bois's book in '03 offers the powerful rebuttal. But Du Bois doesn't just write, he acts. By 1905, he helps start the Niagara Movement, a radical group demanding rights immediately. And then, just 4 years later, he co-founds the NAACP, which would become the legal powerhouse fighting Jim Crow in the courts. And so you see these two incredible, tangible legacies. Washington's philosophy lives on through institutions like the Tuskegee Institute, focusing on practical education and empowerment. And Du Bois's legacy? Well, that's the protest tradition of the NAACP, the organization that fought all the way to the Supreme Court for cases like Brown versus Board of Education and changed America forever. Which leaves us with a question that feels just as urgent today as it was 100 years ago. When you're up against massive injustice, what's the right move? Do you work within the system? Build your power patiently through compromise? Or do you stand up and persistently protest, demanding that the system itself change? It's a great debate that, in many ways, is still going on.